Hello friends, it's your buddy Nick here with Game with the Guys. We're hanging out with Fake in the Crucifixion Woods, the Road of Sacrifices here in Dark Souls 3. And I wanted to go back, before I fought the boss of this area, I wanted to go back and show you some of the other strategies for taking care of some of the enemies in this area. And just to speed this up, I will go ahead and poison it also, but if you have it just right here, it gets stuck in the door, and it can't do anything. It has this one spell, I guess you can call that a spell. It has one attack that is a projectile attack, but otherwise you can just kind of avoid it. And if you go far enough back, it really just can't even hit you at all. You can just sneak around the walls and the doors and stuff, and this giant crab will never even hit you. But let's just go ahead and get to the thing's death. So that guy doesn't really give you anything, but you saw that when we kill the second one, that drops the Great Swamp Ring. And straight over my head is where we fought the exiles, the watchdogs of Farron. And there's a different way that you can take care of them also, and it's kind of the similar method as what I'm going to show you with some of these guys over here. And I talked about it in the last episode, but I wasn't really able to demonstrate it. And so I just wanted to go back and show you again while I'm here how these guys they're sitting by the fire, hanging out, being chained to crucifix. They're crucifixes. But you can aggro them and they'll just be hanging out right here. And if you've got a few fire bombs, you can just toss them down. And hopefully you can kind of get them in the exact same... You can kind of get them to hang out on the same side. You can get both of them with a fire bomb. There we are. But there we are. Now I'm hitting both of them. So this is a much easier way to kill these guys. But if you go too far forward, you have to be careful. Throwing the fire bombs, you've got a little bit of forward progress that happens when you do it. So if you go too far forward, you're going to slide down there and have to fight these guys, well, 2 against 1, which, as I said before, is not desirable. And we'll just pick up whatever goodies he dropped. An ember. Isn't that delightful? So I wanted to come back over here and just kind of take a look at part of this area. I don't want to go in there. I don't want to fight any of those guys. But am I safe right here? Oh look, Hodrick's back. That's fun. Oh, the reason why he's back is because he didn't die. It's because I ran out of the area and he went home. So I could summon him again if I wanted, but he won't help me with the boss, so that's no fun. Anyway, I kind of felt that this area back here kind of reminded me of the Darkroot Garden. Just kind of the types of the trees and, you know, having some broken buildings in the area. Just kind of reminded me of the garden. And that's an area from Dark Souls 1, and it leads into Ulasil. Or actually, I should say, it more than leads into Ulasil. It was Ulasil. We get to explore a lot of Ulasil in the DLC, but the DLC takes place in the past, and when we're going through the Darkroot Garden, it is the modern area based on Ulasil. But anyway, you know, just having the big roots and all of that stuff, the trees, I thought that you could see some flowers because Ulasil, or the Darkroot Garden, had flowers that kind of illuminated the area, but I'm not really seeing any of those. But I thought that you could probably see some. Maybe from a different area. But let's go ahead and head over to the boss room. The way that I beat up those crucifixion beasts, that's a similar thing that you can do with the exiles over there. You can get them to follow you, and they'll end up in this area down here, and you can just shoot them down with your bow. Or if you run up this way and through here and try not to get hit by any soul spears, if you've got the range on you, you can take a bow like this, shoot it way over to them, and get him to come over here, and he won't be able to get up here to fight you. So you can just stand right here and just do whatever you want to that guy. Not a problem. So those are a few additional strategies for taking care of some of the annoying enemies in this area. But now we're going to head back toward the Crystal Sage. Oh, this guy's come down here. He's a Crystal Sage wannabe. Oop, not that way. This way. And when I go into the boss room, I always like to take the path that goes by where Orbeck was hanging out, just because it gives you an advantage on the enemies in the area, because there's so many of them. Even though they're not particularly strong, it makes it a lot easier to take them on when you're coming from the higher ground. So if we come over here, there is another one of the mage ones, and I want to take care of him first, and we can just get a plunge attack on him and just get rid of him immediately. And we'll see that there are a number of other hollows in here, and they seem not to be paying any attention, so I'll just go ahead and sneak around. Oh, that one guy was, but whoop. You'll notice that I walked over a summon sign. So there is a summon available for this area, for this boss fight, and it is Egon of Kareem. Oh, there's a second sorcerer. He's usually further up in this path, but he's come down to fight. So I will just grab him with this. It doesn't have an animation to grab him. It tends to be just kind of like the player type models that you can do the grab attack, like what I did with the Mad Woman. Oh, I almost ran through there. And that is not a good idea to do, especially if you haven't killed the guy that's down there. That's where we were to fight the crabs. That's where the sage ring is. That's where the sorcerer equipment is. And that's where there's one of those crucifixion bad guys. But back to Egon here. He's available for this fight, but to say that he's worthless would be nice. He is beyond worthless. But you can get a good glimpse of his really interesting shield called the Moaning Shield and his armor set. And you see with the, is it called the pauldrons? The shoulder pieces there. You can see how it's kind of, it has a design to it, but it's almost like it, you know, it said that it's made out of a material that's almost like it's rock. And so you can see like almost like a spine there, but you get a good look at how his armor looks and how it's rock-like in a sense, like a humanoid rock thing. And this is just a little path back to, well, that's where we entered. That's where we ran over to see the exiles, the Farron watchdogs. But if we head up through this way, we can get to the boss. And it is highly recommended that you put on whatever magic defense that you have available. I'm going to look for the best stuff that I have. It's generally going to be your sorcerer set. So I'm going to put that on here. Oh, actually the conjurer robe is better for magic defense there. Oh, I was looking at the firekeeper set. I stand corrected. So here we are there. And so I'm just going to look like a little mage here. Where did I put that? The conjurer boots. are better than that. Oh, okay, so Conjurer Boots it is. So now I look like a little sorcerer. And what I'm also going to do is set up my blue bug pellets to increase my defense against the sorcery here. This is once again a two-stage boss fight, as they generally are. The first stage is quite easy, but he does have a lot of magical attacks that are quite powerful. And I never noticed the mushrooms growing on the bottom of the staff, but that's very cool. That's neither here nor there. As we go in here, he will spawn on the far end of the boss room. And you'll get an opportunity to run up and attack him. And it's best to just avoid his sorceries as you go in and get in close and do as much damage as possible. Just totally use up all of your stamina. And at that point, he's going to warp away. Now, the Dark Hand here is a good weapon to use because it does not take a lot of stamina. And I'm also going to demonstrate that you can poison him. But it's very dangerous to do so, as you see. But he is poisoned now, and I died. So poisoning, it's asking for trouble. Told you this guy's usually further back here. So we're going to try that again, and I'm actually going to follow my own advice. Not try to poison him, and just kind of go in straight for the kill. And you'll see that... Whoa! I got hit by one of the sorceries. They do a lot of damage, but you can come in here. He tried to use more of a melee spell on me there, but I was able to knock him out before he got it off on me. We're still in the first phase of the fight. He usually warps to a far distant area, and that will continue on as he's in the second stage of the fight too. But here I'm going to try to just get as much damage on him as... Oh, I might kill him. Alright, well... That is awesome. Usually you don't get to do that. So I'll show you a little footage from Spelldexia's fight. But he will pop up with a bunch of clones, and you'll notice in the first half of the fight that the crystal ball that he holds glows purple. And that is the tell of which one of these clones in the second half of the fight is the one you want to attack. All of the clones have kind of a blue sorcery that they use, but then the main one, he has the purple. So, yeah, just don't wait for them to attack you. You want to get up, dodge sorceries, jump, dive, dip. What is it in dodgeball? Dip, dive, dodge, duck, and dodge some more. Something like that. You just dodge the sorceries, run up, and wreak havoc on him until you have exhausted your stamina. And as much of the magic resistance as you can allot is going to be your best bet. But I'm going to go Fashion Souls and put on this set again. I do really like the Conjurer set. I think it's pretty fun. So now it's time to head back to Firelink. We met a new NPC in Orbeck, and I can just demonstrate the flowiness of the Conjurer set. And the Conjurer set on the male and female look very different. So that's kind of fun. I like the female set even better. But we'll go and see what kind of new things are going on at Firelink since Orbeck's gotten over there. And back at Firelink. What up? I always like to say hello to the Firekeeper. But this is the point where we talk about the lore of the Crystal Sage. So first, let's look at his soul. As it reads, Soul of a Crystal Sage, or, as it's called in the Japanese version of the game, Crystal Elder. But, you know, that kind of has the same connotation. A sage or an elder, a wise person, a teacher of sorts. So, kind of a similar connotation, but different word usage there. And this middle part we know about. So the twin crystal sages, at this point we didn't realize that there are two of them, but there are two. They once served as spiritual guides to the scholars of the Grand Archives. So, I've pointed out the Grand Archives before. We'll learn about that once we get there, but we see that they once served as the spiritual guides to the scholars there. So, I mentioned when we looked at the Sage Ring that it talked about the Preacher Twins. So in a sense, these guys, they are spiritual guides. They are a form of preacher, but to magically inclined scholars. So they probably weren't teaching faith-based lessons. They were kind of teaching spiritual lessons based in magic. And we see that these guys, they wore the big hats like Big Hat Logan. And we'll see more about that in just a minute here. But so they probably taught the spiritualism of the history of the Grand Archives, the history of Big Hat, and that is a different path than than faith. And we see down at the bottom here that one went on to ally with the Undead Legion. And that's where we found him, very close to the Undead Legion. So this must be that one. The other one is likely back in the Grand Archives.
Aha, thou returned, and a fine day it is. So, happened upon any twisted souls?
He's always in such a great mood. First and foremost, let me just look at this weapon. You should always get this weapon. Always, always, always. And so I'll just go ahead and take that. And it doesn't really have a lot of lore here. Thrusting sword with tiny crystals scattered across its blade, used by the crystal sages for self-defense. This looks more like the crystal imbuement from Dark Souls 1. It is a split damage type, and it is what the crystal the sages used. I don't know that you really got a chance to see him use it. They mostly use magic, but this is what they use here. So the crystals boost the magic damage inflicted by the sword, and the item discovery of its wielder. Fruits of a lifetime of research conducted by the sages. This increases your item discovery by 50 points whenever it's equipped. So just keep it in your offhand. It will always work for you. And then here we have the spell that we can learn from them. And this is Crystal Hail. It shoots up in the air and kind of these Farron darts. I'm gesturing with my hand and you can't see it. But basically a hail of the crystal Farron darts comes down and slams into the ground. This can be a very annoying spell. So this is a unique sorcery developed by extraordinary preacher twins known as the Crystal Sages. And we see them referred to as the Preacher Twins again. This casts a cascade of small crystal soul masses from above. Crystal soul masses have piercing qualities, so they can get through your shield, they can get through your armor, they can get directly to you. In a pact said to have been formed long ago, one of the sages allied with the Undead Legion in order to train the sorcerers of Farron. That is interesting. Why were the sages allied with Farron? We saw that there was the one hanging out near there. We know that he was teaching them these sorceries. Is there a connection between the Grand Archives and Farron Keep? I think it might be because, obviously these sages, they're interested in acquiring knowledge. They want to know as much magic, the history of magic, as possible. And we're seeing in Farron that there are kind of connections to Darkroot Garden, to Ulasil. So they might be kind of searching for, some of the ancient sorceries. We saw Yellowfinger, called such because she wears the yellow garb of a Xanthus scholar, and the Xanthus scholars are looking for the lost Ulasil sorceries. So the crystal sage going there might have been looking for those sorceries, or there might be more divisive evil connections, but I I can't really say I know what those connections might be. But if you have any ideas, just let me know down in the comments below. But we see that the crystal sages did have an effect on the sorcerers of the Farron region, but the basis of their treaty is kind of a mystery. So continuing on with the crystal sages, we can buy its hat.
Well, how?
And if I come into the armor here, oh, we also have the exile armor. I almost forgot. So this is super interesting. We saw the exile knights wearing this big, burly armor, just huge ironclad armor. And the mask almost kind of looks like, if you've seen any interpretations of the Man in the Iron Mask, or even the Lost Sinner from Dark Souls 2, this kind of reminds me of that. So the Iron Mask of the Watchdogs of Farron Keep. After the Legion's Watchers became Lords of Cinder, the wolf blood dried up, and Farron was consumed by a festering wood. So after the Abyss Watchers linked the fire, everything went to hell. That kind of sucks. So it talks about the festering wood, and we looked at it in the last episode, but we didn't go into it. And it is festering. It is poisonous. Within the wood, an emaciated old wolf commands watchdogs to defend the sanctity of the sleeping warriors. Both the exiles were surely watchdogs themselves, for Farron has always been a land of itinerants. And so that's kind of just people that, roam and don't really have a place to call their own. So that goes back to when I was talking about how the Undead Legion might kind of be Dark Souls 3's version of the Night's Watch. So exiles, just cast-offs, disbanded knights, all sorts of things like that. They're looking for a place where they can belong. And Farron Keep is kind of where they find that. So I broke away from the Crystal Sages, but this will take us back. Let me buy this. This is an enormous hat that completely obscures the face, belonged to the twin gurus known as the Crystal Sages. So Crystal Sages, Crystal Elders, twin gurus, twin preachers. They've got a lot of names. It seems that these guys are very knowledgeable, and their reputation is that of being very knowledgeable. So it says that the pair are said to be successors to the great sage Logan, and this big hat is a symbol of their pedigree.
Ashen one. Huh.
Yes, I know that you want more souls, but let's take a look at this hat. And you can't really see it from this view. You can't see it from this view. But this is based on the hat of Big Hat Logan, and he's called Big Hat because he wore a great big hat. And it bobs around as you run and looks really silly. And if you've ever seen Big Trouble in Little China, it kind of reminds me of some of the hats in that. But if you look underneath here, you can see almost what looks like a vulture, maybe a crow, but it is definitely a bird-like look. But then the beak of it is actually covered up. So it's impossible for us to say whether the sages have kind of this crow-like look to them, or if this was a mask that they wore. But once again, remember, crows are related to Velka. And much, 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 much later in the game, we'll learn about maybe some of the things that these sages were teaching to the scholars of the Grand Archives. But let's just say that it might have something to do with, like, oh, I don't know, not linking the fire. Is that a spoiler? It's probably a spoiler, but whatever. I said it looks like Velka. Anyway, we've got a coal to give to our friend here.
What need?
Do what? Oh, I do have a new one. That's right. I picked that one up. I think that's the only one. We can give him this coal here.
Oh, my. This coal is from the Undead Legion, used to forge the weapons of Farron's Abyss Watchers. A fine prize. I'm honored to be endued with it. Now I'll be equipped to infuse special gems. Praise the gods, eh? Time to put this brawn to use.
So he's so excited that we brought him a new coal. And as we look at these things, now we can do the heavy infusion. You can see down below that it changes the attribute bonus. Sharp changes it to dex based versus the strength base of heavy. And then we also have poison. And I'll talk more about poison when we find one of the gems, but you'll see that it adds the additional effects of poison, but it decreases every other, all the other damage, it pretty much decreases. So that's the poison one, and...
Pretty be careful. I don't...
Yes. One of the things that's annoying about the poison gems is you can't buff them. It's predominantly a physical damage infusion, and there are weapons that have their own poison damage that you can still buff, but something that is infused with a poison gem cannot be buffed anymore. So that kind of sucks. But Orbeck is back. He's hanging out here, and he's brought some of his little scrolls and his books and whatnot, and he's ready to teach.
Oh, you're back then. Again. I'm Orbeck of Vinheim, here to teach you sorceries. Let us begin with the basics. The ideal sorcerer bears the twin faces of the dragon. You could at least act as if you're paying attention.
So, he says a couple of things of note there. First of all, he says, let us begin with the basics. Orbeck only knows the basics. He knows more than what Yul knows, but he doesn't really know anything too super exciting here. And then the next thing he says, he talks about the ideal sorcerer bears the twin faces of the dragon. So, what does this mean, the twin faces of the dragon? I have two possible things that this could mean. The twin faces of the dragon, obviously it's going back to Seath, because Seath is the father or grandfather, whichever one it is. He is the one that basically originated sorceries. And in Dark Souls 1, Seath, even though he was a dragon, he was jealous of his brethren, and he turned on them and helped defeat the dragons. So the twin faces being like two faces, so saying one thing but meaning another. So he would be a dragon, but he wanted to kill the dragon. So he was two-faced in that sense, not helping out his own kind. Or it could also mean literally two faces. In Dark Souls 2, all of the big main bosses are based on the big main bosses of Dark Souls 1. And the Duke's Dear Freya is based on Seath the Scaleless. And Freya has literally two faces, because Freya has two heads. So, twin faces, they were identical, but, you know, a evolution, I guess, of Seath. Though, I mean, that evolution of Seath didn't make really any sense at all, but it did have two heads, so that could be what he was talking about there. We do have access to some new spells here. A lot of the beginner ones here, we have Soul Arrow, but then Great Soul Arrow is a stronger version of it. And then we have Heavy Soul Arrow, and then we have Great Heavy Soul Arrow, and once again, the stronger version of the other. Farron Dart, we saw before, a weak little spell. And that's actually what Hazel was firing at us. She was firing this spell at us. And Soul Greatsword. So a very fun spell, and I talked about this a little bit before when we were able to see it from Yuria. And Farron Flash Sword is a different version of Soul Greatsword. alteration of Soul Greatsword developed by sorcerers of the Undead Legion of Farron. The Legion has a tendency to emphasize speed over power, and this practical alteration of an existing sorcery is no exception. And I believe it was in the Sage's Ring, and where it talked about the Farron's pragmatic sorceries, and so this is a perfect example of it. They prefer the speed over the strength, and so the Farron Flash Sword is born. So another interesting thing about the Farron Flash Sword is that when you cast this, you swing your staff like a weapon. And so when you're using this, it can actually be parried. It also has its own kind of unique moveset. So when you're using this, it, like say the longsword has a moveset versus a bastard sword has a moveset. This has its own moveset. So when you swing it around, it kind of looks like a lightsaber, and it's pretty cool like that. Magic Weapon and Magic Shield we've seen before, but these are cheaper versions. We've got the Spook Spell here, which we already had, but there is some interesting stuff in here. It talks about a surreptitious sorcerer, which is something that we hear a lot in Dark Souls 1, and that could be talking about Griggs. Griggs was an NPC from Dark Souls 1 that was from the Vinheim Dragon School, but there was more to him than we realized. He was kind of like what the Spook Spell talks about here, the kind of the assassins of the Vinheim School. And then we have Oral Decoy. So once again, the surreptitious sorcerer at the Vinheim Dragon School. And this one it shoots out basically a sound, and it sounds like the character running by. It works in a very similar manner to the Alluring Skulls, but I feel like this spell does not work as well as it did in previous versions of the game, so I usually don't use this one, though I did like it a lot in Dark Souls 1 and 2. And I do want to just buy a couple of these spells, and the reason why will become evident later. Fake isn't really going to use these, but I'll talk more about it later.
Come again.
What I didn't do was talk to him a second time.
Back again, I see.
I am back.
I suppose this means you're after sorceries. It is folly to claim lives recklessly, Fred. Do not be tempted. No matter the victim's stature, every killing has a consequence. Even as I bloodied my hands, I never realized this simple truth. There I was, the very definition of a fool.
So we get a very good look at his past. The bloodied hands, we can assume that he was a killer of sorts. And it really sounds like he regrets what he was doing. So we're going to learn more about Griggs and his bloody hands and his regret as we go. But that is a very interesting thing that he says. It really sounds like he is remorseful for what he did.
I don't mean to seem overbearing, but have you forgotten? In exchange for my sorceries, you are to bring me knowledge in the form of scrolls detailing the secrets of sorcery. I hope you're not one to break a promise.
And he talks about the scrolls there.
Come again.
As most of the teachers of spells, they'll mention tomes, he mentions scrolls. But when we first met him, he mentioned it pretty much right off the bat. So it is no secret that he wants you to bring scrolls. He wants more knowledge, and he wants to give you more knowledge. It's his way of repaying you for bringing him scrolls. But we also came with a pyromancy tome, and let's just take a look again at it. So I talked before about the pupil-master relationship, and Cornix is fond of that relationship.
There you are, unkindled one. I am pleased to have a pupil as dedicated as you.
Welcome! He gives us a new gesture. So yes, he's He's an old school pyromancer, the pupil-student relationship. But, you know, I can't think of any examples of pyromancers that really weren't in that same vein. So let's give him this tome.
Yes, here we are. It's been long indeed. With this, I can teach you more sophisticated pyromancies. Splendid. I can boast I am your tutor a little longer.
So let's take a look at these new pyromancies. First off, we have the Fire Orb. This signature flame manipulating spell, common to the pyromancers, hurls a giant fire orb. This is just kind of a bigger version of Fireball. The blazing fire orb explodes on impact, dealing fire damage to the surrounding area. You do get a little splash effect with it. They say that once a pyromancer learns this spell, their understanding of the flame deepens, together with a yearning for it. And that maybe is that a cautious tale of, yes, pyromancy is strong, but pyromancy has a life of its own, so you should be cautious. Here is Bursting Fireball. It kind of just, you throw it and they split up into several fireballs, all exploding and kind of giving you a broader range of attack with this one. So the pyromancy of old, restored by Cornyx, one of the Great Swamp's more advanced spells. It's so advanced that he couldn't teach it to you by memory, even though he was the one that restored it. Hurls an exploding fireball, as I mentioned before, a rare technique that undergoes a change after leaving the caster's hand, making the spell renowned for its difficulty. And it's not particularly difficult. 18 intelligence and 12 faith. So, I mean, more difficult than some of these other ones, but not crazy difficult. We talked about this before. Let's see, we have Poison Mist is new. So, a unique pyromancy crafted by Engi, a heretic inhabiting the Great Swamp long ago, creates a poison mist. So Engi was a character from Dark Souls 1. He was known for these evil pyromancies. No, this version of pyromancy split off from the main line. And we're seeing a lot of different versions of pyromancy now by this point. But Engi's pyromancies were forbidden, and that's why he's considered a heretic. And Engi was driven from the Great Swamp, however, his pyromancy continues to succeed him. So it's really hypocritical that they drove him away from the Great Swamp, and then they're like, oh, but we're going to keep using this pyromancy even though we think that it's bad. Perhaps dwellers of the Great Swamp were reminded that their very existence is one rooted in heresy. So that probably looks back at the Witch of Izalith and the fact that she was trying to recreate the first flame. And from that, the Bed of Chaos and the Chaos Flame, and the Chaos Flame is the root of all pyromancies. So had she not tried to recreate the first flame, which was a heretical act in itself, there would be no pyromancy. So that is where this last line comes from. Here we have another one of Carmina's spells. This is an advanced pyromancy that internalizes the flame like Carmina's other spells. Profuse sweating temporarily boosts resistances to bleeding, poison, frost, and curses, and it increases those all by 80 points for 1 minute. The yellowish sweat cures all kinds of ailments. And I don't know that it really cures them, but it definitely resists them. He should also have new dialogue for us. Let's double check.
If you seek pyromancy tomes, take this sage advice. The lands of the lords converge upon Lothric. The home of pyromancy's drifts comparatively close as well. At least, that is what pyromancers of the Great Swamp believe. The place is called Izalith. Oh, how I wish to behold a primal pyromancy. Well, these are old tales. No one knows where the truth begins or ends.
So he tells us about Izalith.
Do not be gone for long. What is a teacher without a pupil?
What indeed? He tells us about Izalith, and it is a place that we will see kind of the evolution of it for Dark Souls 3. And that's a bit of foreshadowing about the primal pyromancies. There are pyromancies that we'll find that are in Izalith and are more rooted toward the original style of pyromancy. And Cornix is excited to see those. He's just such a nice guy. Yuria, on the other hand, wants us to do something quite naughty.
Speak thy desire, honorable Lord of Hollows. Oh, good Hollow, I'm afraid I must say, Orbeck of Vinheim is a cause of much consternation. He proclaimeth himself Lord of Hollows. If left alone, he may one day imperil thy rule. Fall to this matter yearly, else we are unraveled. Decisiveness is the mark of a true monarch.
So she's manipulating us there,
Till
obviously.
we meet again. May the dark sigil guide thee.
But she has no remorse for basically hinting, hey, go kill Orbeck. He thinks that he is a champion. He thinks that he is the Lord of Hollows. So if you want to prove that you really are the Lord of Hollows, you'll go kill him. And you can really do this part of her quest anytime. If you want to follow Yuria's quest line, you can kill Orbeck really at pretty much any time. There's actually a way to get his ashes even without killing him. He still dies, but, you know, otherwise you won't get his ashes. But it's not imperative that we do it immediately, even though, you know, her word choice is that it is something that must be taken care of. You have to do it, obviously, before you want to beat the game, because her quest line kind of demands that. But you can really do it at any time. And there's something that I want to get from him in the not-too-distant future, but then we'll go ahead and take care of him in a decisive manner, like she said. Decisive, putting an end to him. And I'll probably get some levels here, but, you know, nothing too interesting. At this point, I can say thank you for watching. If you want to know what's going on in my gaming world, is what I used to always say. But I actually have all of my notes for these videos posted on my website. So as the video comes out, you can see what notes I actually took for the video. So there's actually even more stuff than I talk about. Sometimes I miss stuff, and, you know, there's even more on there. So if you're interested in seeing my notes, they're always on my website, which is just gamewiththeguys.com. But if you're enjoying this playthrough, hit that like button, share these videos, comment if you have different ideas on the lore as me, or tell me that you like my ideas on the lore. But all of those things really help me out, and I appreciate it. So I'll probably sell some stuff to the handmaid and get some levels. And next time, we'll be catching up with Spelldexia. So thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.